But think about what that means. That means the top 25 most successful, 25% of successful teams in the USL in terms of their budgets, in terms of the money, are losing millions of dollars per year.
All right, shortly after we discussed the maybe problematic or maybe a outdated business model for USL with so many teams expanding and then losing a team every year. I think it was 20 in the last 11 years. Jeff Reuter, great writer, wrote in The Guardian, continuing that conversation, but including some very telling quotes from USL officials and insiders.
Yeah, so this is this is very much evidence of what we talked about when we kind of unpacked the USL business model, and it was a piece from Quail City Soccer that we talked about on Monday. This is Jeff Reuter writing for The Guardian. Jeff's been covering USL for years, so this does not come from a reporter who just sort of dipped his toes in the water and gathered some quotes. Jeff knows the league, he knows the business model, he knows the lay of the land. So the headline here is folding teams, a labor fight, and expansion, question mark. The USL structure allows for it all to happen. And there are a couple of things I wanted to pull out. We'll highlight this one. The USL, meanwhile, still does not have meaningful revenue sharing, something we talked about on Monday with its clubs. Each organization is more or less on its own, hoping to make ends meet through match day revenue, merchandise sales, and selling players in the transfer market, with most recent moves for starters netting 5 figures or low 6-figure returns. So we're not talking about crazy amounts of money, right? We're just into the 100,000 range. In December, Detroit City FC co-owner Sean Mann, a guest on this program in the past, a guy I've talked to many, many times, Robert knows him as well, told Backheel that, quote, losing $4 million a year puts us in the top quartile of most profitable teams in the league, unquote. That's a stunning statement. Now, this is not the first time I've heard something like that from Sean Mann. We probably should have highlighted it on Monday, Rob. But think about what that means. That means the top 25 most successful, 25% of successful teams in the USL in terms of their budgets, in terms of the money, are losing millions of dollars per year.
Yeah, how long can that go on? Even, like you said, the top 25% of USL teams are losing that much money, millions of dollars. And it almost seems like, we're getting lucky, the fact that there's so many teams and ownerships that are willing to lose this amount of money. And when you see it, it really brings to reality of like why teams drop off every single year. Like they need some help here. Come on.
Yeah. And look, this is not us saying, oh, USL is all nonsense and it's going to fail. And first of all, we don't want that to happen, right? Then let's be clear. There's a difference between sort of analyzing and being honest about the way things look, and then also what we want as soccer fans. I want USL to thrive because right now there's nobody else stepping in to the breach to start teams at the same rate that the USL is willing to start teams. But I think it's worth pointing out as we consider the balance of things after Tormenta shut down, which also gets mentioned in Jeff's piece, with some of the other, you mentioned the number of clubs that have collapsed over the last 11 years. It's worth talking about whether this model is sustainable going towards the future. And if we are just okay with the attrition, right? And again, how many people are going to be willing to launch clubs when there is a potential that, even 10 years into your existence as a professional outfit, you could be losing $4 million a year, and the league you're a part of does not share anything with you, because that is what's going on here. Furthermore, from Jeff's piece, the expansion fees paid, $20 million for the championship, $5 million for League One, go directly to headquarters and stay there. Like the USL's lack of revenue sharing, it's a departure from other American League standards where expansion fees serve as something of a bonus to owners whose investment helped the league grow enough to merit a new team or two. And again, we talked about this with MLS. You could argue about the pyramid scheme kind of vibe around MLS. Understandable. But that money from the new teams helps pay back the owners who have lost money in the past running the other teams. And even if that feels all very flimsy and it doesn't feel real, it's kind of, for me, it's like, well, what's the ends here? What are we getting to? Well, if we're getting to a stable league, and now eventually maybe expansion runs out, right? Major League Soccer's at 30 teams. How many more teams can they add to the league to help paying back the old owners before it needs to be sort of, at least, if not profitable, at least relatively stable from a financial standpoint individually to justify further further growth or keeping it going. Now, I think in MLS you're talking about franchise values and those things being a major reason owners are jumping in. Is that the case in the USL? Right? Because I think there's at least one item. I don't think I clipped it, but one part of this piece where Jeff talks about there's nobody stepping up to buy these USL teams when they go on the market. Right. So if there's no marketplace to sell a club, then as an owner, you're not seeing equity in your purchase of a team and your launch of a team. What is your proposition? What's your value proposition?
Yeah, that's a good point. It's like that's a big part of why owners get into it. It's like we lose money now, but we sell for a bigger amount when we put it on the market later. And that's the big windfall at the end of a big investment. Another quote from Jeff's article that raises the brow is he has a quote from Dan Egner, who's an official that led the Rail Monarchs to a USL championship pre-COVID. And the quote says, "It literally costs us money to win the championship. We sold out both of our home playoff games, which was the only revenue we got. And so the final two playoff games were road games where they didn't get any money. There was no prize money whatsoever." And that's in conjunction with another quote from an anonymous person within USL saying, "A team owner said, if we're not going to make the top four, I'd rather not make the playoffs." And that doesn't bode well for competitive product at all.
No. Further here from Jeff's piece, the cost of running a professional team in the U.S. remain high. Backfield estimates the annual expenses of a first-year championship club to be $24 to $29.5 million, and for non-expansion teams to be about $3.7 to $8.4 million a year. For League One, the clubs that comes in 7.6 to 11.5, so around $10 million, $10 million, and 2.4 to 5.4 million for returning teams. So those are your expenses. That's how much it costs to keep your club going in terms of how much you're spending. And then you obviously, again, the only way to offset those expenses is through ticket sales, merchandise, and player sales for the most part. Public records also show that one championship club, Orange County SC, by the way, who just announced that the U.S. men's national team is going to use their facilities and championship soccer stadium in Irvine, California for their World Cup base, spent over $300,000 on TV and radio costs in 2024. Teams pay annual dues exceeding $300,000 as of 2025, while the USL franchise agreement ensures $1.50 or $1.50 of every ticket sold across both leagues goes back to the USL. Right? Again, this is just things seem to be funneling towards the league, and what is the long-term future of this financial model? Per the USL's publicly available financial statements, 61% of their $56 million in revenue came from expansion fees, Rob. Right? We're talking about MLS and the incentive to bring in new clubs to pay back owners via this pyramid scheme. USL is incentivized heavily to keep adding new teams. It explains why Justin Papadakis has been everywhere.
Yeah, that's kind of all of these quotes and the facts you just laid out there are quite sobering. And the business model is kind of contrary to kind of how we've been approaching it, because obviously the teams going to smaller cities and in places that aren't necessarily have access to major league soccer in that first division. So almost like approaching it from a grassroots, trying to raise up from the ground level. But if all the money is funneling upwards, that gets kind of counterintuitive. And I'm not sure if it was in Jeff's article or a comment somewhere was saying that it's probably more profitable for them to take expansion fees, not really worry about their longevity, than just collecting, the regular fees from the existing clubs. And that's kind of a dark way to approach things.
And I don't want to paint everybody involved with USL headquarters or even Papadakis or even as it mentioned here by Kay Velmer in the chat, Rob Hoskins, the investment groups, by the way, they've just got more private equity investment. I'm not going to paint everyone as malevolent. They're not fat cats sitting in chairs stroking cats counting their dollars. I don't think that's what's happening here, but they are in business. And you do wonder if ultimately, while their business is pulling in money via these things and none of that money is going out to the clubs, if there needs to be a shift, right? And what kind of shift can actually happen, and figuring out, because again, if once you revenue share, expansion gets a lot tougher, right? The lift to start an expansion team. Well, now look, we're going to be sharing our revenue with you. Well, you're going to have to pay more to enter the league, right? Because there's guaranteed money coming from the league via whatever we're bringing in. And right now, again, the point is USL doesn't have a ton of other revenue streams via television and those kind of things, Rob, to pay out in the first place. So there's that.